My daughter called me useless, so I sold the business she planned to inherit. I knew the minute Ava stepped through the cafe doors that something had changed. It wasn't just the new designer sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, or the way she offered me that stiff, obligatory hug, arms barely touching, like I might soil her crisp white blazer. No, it was the air around her. Cold. Calculating. Like she was already measuring everything she saw for demolition. "Mama," she said, pulling back from our embrace and scanning Monroe's table with eyes that used to light up whenever she walked through those same doors. Now they moved like a real estate appraiser's, ceiling to floor, corner to corner, cataloging flaws. "Baby girl," I whispered, trying to hold on to the moment. My daughter was home. After 2 years at the Institute of Culinary Education in New York, after months of phone calls that grew shorter and more distant, she was finally back. I should have been nothing but joy. Instead, something cold settled in my stomach like yesterday's grits. The cafe hummed around us with its usual afternoon rhythm. Mrs. Henderson sat at her corner table, working through her second slice of sweet potato pie while she graded papers. Tommy and Marcus argued good-naturedly over their dominoes game, their laughter mixing with the gentle sizzle from the kitchen where my cornbread was browning. The smell of coffee, bacon grease, and hope filled the air, the same combination that had built this place from nothing. Ava's nose wrinkled slightly. "It's exactly the same," she said, and somehow made it sound like a diagnosis. I wanted to tell her that's because it was perfect the way it was. That Monroe's table wasn't just a restaurant, it was a heartbeat. When Marcus lost his job at the plant, we kept him fed for 3 months without him knowing, adding extra portions to his takeout orders. When Mrs. Henderson's husband passed, this became her daily refuge from an empty house. When the Smith twins graduated high school, we threw them a party right here between these yellow walls, with all their neighbors cheering. But Ava was already moving, her heels clicking against the worn linoleum like a countdown timer. She stopped at the wall where I'd hung photos of Monroe, my late husband, and all the people who'd made this place their second home over the past 8 years. "These pictures," she said, tilting her head, "they make it feel so personal, like someone's living room instead of a business." The way she said personal made it sound like a disease. I followed her gaze to the largest photo, Monroe in his apron, flower in his hair, grinning at the camera on our opening day. He'd been gone 4 years now, sudden as a summer storm, leaving me with recipes written in his impossible handwriting and a dream that felt too big for one person to carry. Except I had carried it. I'd learned to read his chicken scratch notes about the perfect roux timing. I'd figured out how to make his gumbo sing without him humming in my ear while he stirred. I'd turned Monroe's table into something that mattered, a place where people didn't just eat, they belonged. "Your daddy would be so proud," I said softly. "Of you, I mean. Coming home with all that fancy training." Ava smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Actually, Mama, I wanted to talk to you about that." She set her purse down, some expensive leather thing I didn't recognize, and pulled out a tablet. "I've been thinking a lot about the restaurant's potential, about what we could do with it." "We." She swiped the screen, and suddenly I was looking at charts and graphs and words like brand optimization and market penetration. The numbers swam before my eyes, but the pictures were clear enough. This wasn't Monroe's table anymore. This was some slick concept with Edison bulb lighting and distressed wood that probably cost more than our monthly rent. "I've put together a comprehensive business plan," Ava continued, her voice taking on a practiced pitch. "The location is prime, but we're not maximizing our potential. The menu needs updating. Some of these dishes are..." She paused, searching for the right word. "Dated. Traditional soul food is fine for a certain demographic, but we need to think broader. Elevated comfort food. Instagram-worthy plating. A cocktail program." Each word hit me like a slap. Traditional. Dated. Certain demographic. "What's wrong with soul food?" I asked quietly. "Nothing's wrong with it, Mama. It's just limiting. Look at this place." She gestured around the dining room where Mr. Pete was teaching his grandson to play chess, where the Williams family was celebrating their youngest daughter's acceptance to college with my husband's famous bread pudding. It stuck in time. The decor, the menu, even music, it's all so. She didn't finish, but I heard the word anyway. Old. I thought about the morning I'd stood in this empty space 8 years ago, widowed and scared, with nothing but Monroe's recipes and an insurance payout that barely covered the first month's rent. I thought about painting these walls yellow because Monroe always said sunshine belonged indoors. I thought about learning to run a business while learning to live without him, about the nights I'd stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting his jambalaya recipe through tears. Your daddy and I started then stopped. Ava was already swiping to the next slide. I've identified several areas for immediate improvement, she said. Starting with the name, Monroe's Table doesn't really communicate what we're about. I was thinking something like Meridian or Crossroads Kitchen. Something that suggests innovation while still honoring the Southern roots. Monroe's Table doesn't communicate what we're about? This place was built on Monroe's recipes, Monroe's dreams, Monroe's belief that food could heal people. His name was the first thing customers saw when they walked in, the last thing they heard when I thanked them for coming. It was our promise that someone who loved them had touched their food. And the staff, Ava continued, oblivious to my silence. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure they're nice people, but we need to think about presentation. Professional training, unified uniforms, consistent service standards. I looked toward the kitchen where Donna was plating up her special of the day, humming along to the Aretha Franklin playing from the old radio Monroe bought at a yard sale. Donna had been with me since month 2, when I was still burning the cornbread and forgetting to salt the greens. She taught me more about running a kitchen than any culinary school ever could. When her son got arrested, I gave her time off and kept her on full pay. When her mother got sick, I covered her shifts without question. They're family, I said. Family doesn't always make good business sense, Mama. You have to separate emotion from. Don't. The word came out sharper than I intended. Ava looked up from her tablet, surprised. Don't tell me about separating emotion from this place. Emotion is what built it. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Something that looked almost like the little girl who used to sit at the counter doing homework while Monroe and I prepped for dinner service. The child who'd steal tastes of his praline sauce and declare she was going to be a chef, just like Daddy. But then she blinked, and the business consultant was back. Mama, I know this is hard to hear. Change always is. But if we don't evolve, we'll get left behind. The neighborhood is gentrifying. Property values are rising. We have an opportunity here to position ourselves for the new demographic moving in. The new demographic. Not the families who'd been coming here for 8 years. Not Mrs. Henderson or Mr. Pete or the Williams family. The new people. The ones who mattered. I've already reached out to some investors, Ava said, and my heart stopped. Just preliminary conversations, you understand. But there's real interest in what we could build here. With the right backing, we could expand. Maybe franchise the concept. Think bigger, Mama. I stared at my daughter. My beautiful, ambitious daughter who'd inherited Monroe's passion for food, but somehow missed the lesson about why we cook. She saw dollar signs where I saw dignity. She saw market opportunities where I saw Marcus teaching his nephew how to tie his shoes between bites of my mac and cheese. I'm proud of you, I said finally, because I was. Terrified and heartbroken, but proud. You've learned so much. She beamed, mistaking my words for approval. I have so many ideas, Mama. This is just the beginning. Wait until you see what we can accomplish together. Together. But as she launched into talk of elevated presentations and brand positioning, I wondered if she really meant it, or if she meant after. Outside, the sun was setting behind the buildings across the street, painting Monroe's Table in golden light. The same light that had blessed our opening day, our first profitable month, every small victory, and survived crisis since. I watched my daughter's reflection in the window, animated and excited, planning the future of something she didn't seem to understand had already been perfect. I thought about Monroe's hands teaching mine to fold wontons, his voice explaining that the secret ingredient in everything was caring about the person who would eat it. I thought about the thank you cards taped to the register, The photos of customers' babies, the community bulletin board by the door, where people still posted job openings and lost pet flyers because they knew Monroe's table was where neighbors took care of neighbors. "What do you think, Mama?" Ava asked, finally looking up from her presentation. I looked at my daughter, my brilliant, driven daughter who'd learned everything about food except why it mattered, and I smiled. "I think," I said carefully, "we should talk more about this tomorrow, after you've had a chance to rest." She nodded, satisfied, and started packing up her tablet. As she headed for the door, she paused and looked back. "It's going to be amazing, Mama. You'll see." After she left, I stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by the gentle chatter of people who'd made Monroe's table their home. I touched the photo of Monroe, traced his smile with my finger. "She's back," I whispered to him. "But I don't think she came home." It started small. Ava arrived early the next morning with coffee. Not my coffee, but some fancy oat milk creation from the new place downtown, and a smile that didn't quite hide her impatience. "I was thinking about our conversation yesterday," she said, settling into the booth where Monroe used to plan our weekly specials. "And I realized we should start implementing some changes right away. Strike while the iron's hot, you know?" I was in the middle of my morning prep, hands deep in biscuit dough the way Monroe taught me. Feel for the texture, don't overwork it, trust your instincts. "What kind of changes?" "Small ones. Nothing dramatic." She pulled out her tablet again. I took the liberty of redesigning the lunch menu. More modern layout, better descriptions. And I thought we could test a few new items. See how customers respond. The biscuit dough suddenly felt like concrete between my fingers. "You redesigned menu?" "Just tweaking it." "Look." She turned the screen toward me, and I saw our simple, handwritten menu board transformed into something sleek and cold. Bourbon-glazed pork belly instead of just pork chops. Artisanal mac and cheese with aged Gruyere. Elevated comfort classics. Our pork chops weren't just pork chops. They were Monroe's pork chops, seasoned with a blend he'd perfected over 20 years, served with the apple glaze his grandmother taught him in Louisiana. Our mac and cheese was Donna's recipe, the one that had comforted 3 generations of her family and countless customers who'd found their way to our counter on their worst days. "Ava, honey, I already had them printed," she said quickly. "The old ones were getting worn anyway. And I scheduled a meeting with that food blogger, Jessica Chin. She has like 50,000 followers. If she features us, we could see a real boost in traffic." My hands stilled in the dough. "You scheduled a meeting without asking me?" "I'm just trying to help, Mama. You said you were proud of what I learned in school. Let me use it." Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Donna walked in for her morning shift, stopping short when she saw the stranger at Monroe's booth. "Donna, this is my daughter Ava," I said, grateful for the interruption. "Ava, Donna's been with us since the beginning, basically," Ava finished, standing to shake Donna's hand with a smile that looked practiced. "Mama's told me so much about you. Actually, I was hoping we could chat sometime about updating some of our kitchen procedures." Donna's eyes flicked to me, then back to Ava. "What kind of updates?" "Oh, just efficiency things. Plating standards, timing optimization. Small tweaks that could make a big difference." I watched Donna's face close off, the same way it did when health inspectors came around asking pointed questions. She nodded politely and headed to the kitchen without another word. The next few days blurred together in a string of small invasions. New menus appeared without discussion. Ava moved our community bulletin board because it cluttered the aesthetic. She rearranged the counter display, hiding Mrs. Henderson's homemade jam under the register because handwritten labels don't project professionalism. Then the staff changes began. "I think we need to consider bringing in some fresh faces," Ava announced one afternoon, watching Carlos, our part-time server, joke with regulars at table 6. "Carlos is sweet, but he's not exactly polished. And with the influencer event coming up." "What influencer event?" Ava paused, tablet halfway to her face. "I mentioned Jessica Chun, remember? I scheduled her for next Thursday. Prime time for social media engagement." "You scheduled an influencer for next Thursday, and you're just telling me now?" It's one blogger mama, but she could change everything for us. However, we need the service to be flawless. Carlos is great with irregulars, but he calls everyone honey and tells stories about his grandkids. It's unprofessional. Unprofessional. Carlos, who worked double shifts when Donna's son was in the hospital. Carlos, who knew exactly how Mr. Pete liked his coffee and always remembered to ask about Tommy's arthritis. Carlos, who made people feel welcome instead of served. By Wednesday, Carlos was gone. Found something closer to home, Ava explained, but I caught the look he gave me when he collected his last paycheck. Hurt and confused, like he couldn't understand what he'd done wrong. The new server was punctual, efficient, and called everyone sir or ma'am. She didn't know that Mrs. Henderson took her sweet tea with exactly one ice cube, or that the Williams family always split their dessert 3 ways. She was exactly what Ava wanted. Invisible. I started feeling invisible too. Thursday morning, I arrived to find Ava directing 2 young men as they moved tables around, creating what she called better flow for photography. The cozy conversation Nooks Monroe had designed were gone, replaced by stark rows that looked good for pictures, but terrible for people. Where should I prep today's special? I asked. Oh, I handled that, Ava said without looking up from her clipboard. I thought we'd showcase the new menu items for Jessica. Really give her something to talk about. For 8 years, Thursday's special had been Monroe's jambalaya. Made from his mother's recipe, simmered low and slow, served with stories about New Orleans and family traditions. I'd already started the roux before dawn, the way he taught me. I already started the jambalaya. We can save it for tomorrow. Today needs to be perfect. That evening, I stayed late to finish inventory, my usual routine before the weekend rush. The dining room was quiet, chairs stacked on tables, the ghosts of the day's conversations still echoing off the walls. I was about to lock up when I heard Ava's voice from the office. Basically, just here for nostalgia at this point. I froze, key halfway to the lock. The business has completely outgrown her. She was never meant to run it long-term anyway. Ava's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. My father had the vision, but after he died, she just maintained. There's been no growth, no evolution. She's sweet, but honestly, she's useless when it comes to taking this to the next level. Useless. The word hit me like a physical blow. I pressed my back against the wall, listening to my daughter explain to strangers how little I mattered in the business I'd built with my own hands. The investors I'm talking to understand that. They're not investing in her. They're investing in the potential, in what this place could become with proper management. I listened to her lay out timelines and profit projections, heard her describe Monroe's table like it was just real estate and recipes, nothing more. When she finally hung up, I slipped out the back door like a thief in my own restaurant. Driving home, that word echoed in my head. Useless. Like the 8 years I'd poured into keeping Monroe's dream alive meant nothing. Like the community I'd nurtured, the staff I'd trained, the traditions I'd preserved were just obstacles to progress. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark car for a long time, thinking about Monroe's hands teaching mine to season the jambalaya, his voice explaining that cooking wasn't about the food, it was about the love you put into it. Maybe it was time to stop being silent. Maybe it was time to show Ava exactly how useless her mother really was. The unraveling happened slowly at first, then all at once. Donna came to me on a Tuesday morning, eyes red-rimmed and apologetic. Elise, I'm sorry, but I got to give my notice. My hands stilled on the coffee pot. What? Why? My nephew got me an interview at that new hotel downtown. Better hours, better pay. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I know it's sudden, but Donna, if this is about money, we can talk. You've been with me since. It ain't about money. The words came out sharp, then she softened. Look, I love this place. You know that. But things are changing, and I got to think about my future. She left Friday. By the following week, Miguel from the prep kitchen had found work at a catering company, and Susan, our weekend waitress, suddenly needed to focus on school full-time. Then the vendors started backing out. First it was Franklin Farms, who'd supplied our fresh vegetables since year 2. Sorry, Elise, but we're streamlining our client list. Then Peterson's Bakery called to say they couldn't deliver our dinner rolls anymore, scheduling conflicts. Within a month, 3 of our long-term suppliers had found excuses to end our contracts. It's probably for the best, Ava said when I mentioned it. I've been researching more upscale vendors anyway. Places that can provide organic, locally sourced ingredients with proper certifications. But the worst part was watching our customers slip away. Not all at once, that would have been obvious. Instead, it was the gradual absence of familiar faces. Mrs. Henderson still came for her afternoon pie, but she seemed quieter, more reserved. The Williams family hadn't been in for 3 weeks. Tommy and Marcus moved their domino games to the diner across town. When I asked the new server if anyone had complained about the food or service, she just shrugged. Some people don't like change, I guess. The final blow came on a Thursday evening when I arrived early to prep for Friday's lunch rush and found the dining room transformed. Again, gone were the yellow walls Monroe and I had painted together, covered now with stark white paint and oversized black and white photographs of faceless hands kneading dough. The warm lighting had been replaced with harsh spotlights that made everything look clinical. Where Monroe's photos used to hang, a sleek new logo proclaimed Meridian Kitchen in austere lettering. Surprise! Ava emerged from the kitchen wearing a black dress I'd never seen, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. I know we talked about waiting, but the opportunity was too good to pass up. Jessica Chun brought some friends, food influencers with serious followings. Tonight's our soft relaunch. My throat closed. Relaunch. The rebranding event. I sent you an email about it yesterday. She gestured toward the new menus scattered on tables. Take a look. I think you'll be impressed. I picked up the nearest menu with shaking hands. Meridian Kitchen dominated the top, with a subtitle that made my blood freeze. Elevated Southern Cuisine. Below it, Monroe's carefully crafted dishes had been renamed beyond recognition. His famous jambalaya was now Creole Fusion Bowl. The mac and cheese he'd perfected over 20 years had become artisanal 4-cheese gratin with truffle oil. Where's Monroe's gumbo? I whispered. Oh, that old recipe? I replaced it with a deconstructed version. Same flavors, but presented in a way that photographs better. Much more Instagram-worthy. The front door chimed, and a parade of 20-somethings with expensive cameras began filing in. They moved through the space like sharks, snapping photos and making observations loud enough for everyone to hear. The lighting is perfect for content, one said. Very authentic adjacent, another agreed. Like Southern comfort food, but make it chic. I watched them settle at tables, ordering dishes they pronounced incorrectly while taking pictures of food they barely touched. One vlogger, Jessica Chun, I assumed, interviewed Ava near the counter, praising the brave transformation and visionary approach to traditional cuisine. None of them noticed me. I slipped into the kitchen and began making Monroe's gumbo the way he taught me. Dark roux first, stirred patiently until it reached the color of chocolate. Then the holy trinity, onions, celery, bell peppers, added in the exact proportions his grandmother had whispered to him as a boy. I let it simmer while the influencers laughed and photographed their way through the bastardized version of my husband's legacy. When it was ready, I ladled the gumbo into Monroe's favorite serving bowl, the one with the chip on the rim that he'd refused to throw away, and carried it to the dining room. Fresh gumbo, I announced to the room. My husband's recipe. The conversations continued around me. A few people glanced over politely, but no one moved to try it. They were too busy with their deconstructed versions, their photographs, their networking. I stood there holding Monroe's gumbo while strangers dissected the soul of his restaurant, and something inside me finally broke. After the last influencer left, praising Ava for her exciting vision, I found myself alone in the kitchen. The new staff had gone home. Ava was in the office, probably on another call with investors, riding high on the evening's success. I walked to the wall where Monroe's photo had hung, the one from our opening day, both of us flour-dusted and exhausted and happier than we'd ever been. It was in the dumpster out back now, replaced by sterile art that meant nothing to no one. I pulled the photo from the trash and brushed off the coffee grounds clinging to the frame. Monroe's smile looked back at me, full of hope and dreams and the absolute certainty that we were building something beautiful together. In the office, I could hear Ava's voice. Tonight exceeded all expectations. The buzz on social media is incredible. We're positioned perfectly for the next phase. I folded the photo carefully and slipped it into my purse. Then I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in 15 years. Lionel Baptiste, Monroe's best friend. The one who'd wanted to partner with us from the beginning, who'd offered to help expand Monroe's table into something bigger. The one I'd said no to, because I'd wanted to keep it small, keep it ours, keep it real. My finger hovered over his number. Once I made this call, there would be no going back. From the office came Ava's laughter, bright and victorious. I pressed dial. Lionel. My voice was steady, calmer than I'd felt in weeks. It's Elise Monroe. I think it's time we had that conversation about Monroe's table. The silence on the other end stretched so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then Lionel's familiar laugh, deep and warm as molasses, filled my ear. Elise Monroe. Lord have mercy. After all these years, you're finally ready to listen to sense. I could picture him clearly, 6'4" and gentle as a giant. The kind of man who could command a kitchen full of line cooks with a whisper and make a grandmother feel like royalty with his attention. Monroe's best friend since childhood, best man at our wedding, the brother we'd chosen for ourselves. Maybe, I said. Tell me what you had in mind. Same thing I've been saying for 15 years, darling. Monroe had something special, and you've kept it alive all this time. But imagine what we could do together. Bring that magic to people in Atlanta, Nashville, Charleston. Let Monroe's name mean something bigger. Lionel Baptiste wasn't just talking dreams anymore. Since I'd last seen him, he'd built an empire, 12 restaurants across the Southeast, each one a love letter to traditional Southern cooking. Baptiste's table had become synonymous with authentic soul food, the kind of place where celebrities ate alongside construction workers, and everyone felt equally welcome. I looked you up online, I admitted. What you've built. Monroe would be proud. Monroe would be pissed I haven't convinced you to partner with me yet, Lionel said, and I could hear his smile through the phone. What changed your mind? I told him everything. About Ava's return, the gradual erasure of everything Monroe and I had built, the staff departures, the rebranding, about being called useless in my own restaurant. That child doesn't know what she's throwing away, Lionel said quietly when I finished. But you do. Question is, what do you want to do about it? I want to sell, I said, but not to her investors. To someone who understands what this place really is. I'm listening. 3 conditions, I said, surprising myself with how clear my demands were. The name stays Monroe's Table. Not Meridian Kitchen, not whatever trendy nonsense she's planning. Monroe's Table. Agreed. Second, the recipes stay. Monroe's jambalaya, his gumbo, everything he taught me. No deconstructed versions, no elevated presentations. The food that built this place. Wouldn't have it any other way. Third, I paused, watching through the office window as Ava animated gestured to someone on her laptop screen, probably another investor call. I stay on. Not as a figurehead, not for nostalgia. As head chef, with real authority over the menu and kitchen operations. Elise, honey, you think I'd try to run Monroe's Table without Monroe's wife? That would be like trying to make gumbo without the roux. We talked for another hour, working out details that felt both monumental and surprisingly simple. Lionel would buy the restaurant for a fair price, more than fair, actually, enough to secure my future regardless of what happened with Ava. He'd keep me on as executive chef and partner in any future locations. The original Monroe's Table would serve as the flagship, the keeper of standards for everything that came after. How soon can we make this happen? I asked. Give me 3 days for the paperwork. My lawyer's fast, and your books are clean. When do you want to tell your daughter? Through the window, I watched Ava hang up her call and pump her fist in victory. There's an investor presentation tomorrow night. Big affair, all her potential backers in one room. Lionel was quiet for a moment. You want to tell her in front of them? I want her to understand that actions have consequences. That the people she dismissed as useless might have more power than she realized. Elise Monroe, you've got a mean streak. I like it. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Ava threw herself into preparations for what she called her investors' preview night, oblivious to the fact that contracts were being signed and ownership papers filed across town. She ordered flowers, hired additional servers, even brought in a photographer to document what she called the next chapter in Monroe's table's evolution. I've got commitments from 6 serious investors, she told me Wednesday morning, arranging canopy plates with the precision of a military operation. By Friday, we'll have the backing to open 3 new locations within the year. I nodded and smiled, all while knowing that by Friday, those investors would be looking at acquisition offers from Baptiste Hospitality Group instead. Lionel's lawyer was as efficient as promised. Thursday afternoon, I sat in a downtown office signing papers that transferred ownership of Monroe's table to someone who'd loved it almost as long as I had. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Ava planned her grand takeover upstairs, I was quietly orchestrating her downfall 1 floor below. You sure about this? Lionel asked as I signed the final document. He'd driven down from Atlanta for the closing, looking distinguished in his navy suit but with the same kind eyes I remembered. Once this is done, there's no going back. I thought about Monroe's photo in my purse, about Donna cleaning out her locker last week, about Carlos's hurt expression when he realized he was being replaced. I thought about my husband's gumbo sitting untouched while strangers photographed pretty lies. I'm sure. That evening, I watched Ava arrange and rearrange the dining room one final time. She'd brought in additional lighting equipment and positioned cameras at strategic angles to capture the perfect ambience for social media. This is it, Mama, she said, stepping back to admire her work. Tomorrow night changes everything. I touched Monroe's photo in my purse, returned to its rightful place in my bag instead of on the wall. Yes, I said quietly. I believe it will. Ava was so focused on her preparations, she never noticed the new paperwork filed with the state business registry. She never saw Lionel's lawyer reviewing our vendor contracts or updating our insurance policies. She had no idea that tomorrow night, she'd be presenting her expansion plans for a restaurant she no longer had any claim to. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone reveal exactly who they are. Friday evening arrived with all the fanfare Ava had orchestrated. 23 potential investors filled the dining room, a mix of venture capitalists, restaurant chain executives, and local business owners drawn by promises of the next big thing in Southern dining. They sipped craft cocktails and sampled what Ava called elevated comfort food, their conversations peppered with terms like scalability and market penetration. I stood in the back corner, wearing the simple black dress I'd chosen for Monroe's funeral, watching my daughter work the room like she owned it. Which, until 3 days ago, she'd assumed she would. Ladies and gentlemen, Ava called out, tapping her champagne glass with a spoon. The room quieted as she moved to the front, positioning herself beneath the harsh new lighting that made everything look clinical. Thank you all for being here tonight to witness the beginning of something extraordinary. She clicked a remote, and a projection screen descended from the ceiling, another addition I hadn't approved. Images flashed across it. Architectural renderings of sleek restaurants, profit projections, demographic studies. My father built Monroe's table 28 years ago, Ava began, and something cold twisted in my stomach. 28 years ago, Monroe was still learning to be a line cook in New Orleans. We'd built this place 8 years ago after he died, after I had to figure out how to live without him. But vision requires evolution, she continued. Tonight, I'm presenting Meridian Hospitality, a restaurant group that will bring elevated Southern cuisine to markets across the region. The slides showed her timeline: 6 new locations within 18 months, standardized menus, centralized operations. She talked about optimizing the dining experience and leveraging brand recognition. She never once mentioned the community that had sustained us, the relationships that had given Monroe's table its soul. The original location will serve as our flagship, Ava explained, gesturing around the sterile white walls. We've already begun the rebranding process, as you can see. Traditional elements that were limiting growth have been replaced with a more modern, Instagram-friendly aesthetic. Limiting growth. She was talking about Monroe's photos, about the yellow walls we'd painted together, about the corner where Mrs. Henderson graded papers and Marcus taught his nephew chess. The target demographic is affluent millennials and Gen Z diners who want authentic flavors presented in a contemporary format. We're talking about a $10 million opportunity in year one alone. She paused for effect, surveying her audience with the confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. With your investment, we can transform not just one restaurant, but an entire concept. We can take something local and make it legendary. The room erupted in polite applause. Several investors leaned forward, clearly intrigued. I watched Ava's face glow with triumph as she fielded questions about expansion timelines and profit margins. That's when I stepped forward. "Excuse me," I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. Heads turned toward me, confusion rippling across the room. Ava's smile faltered. "Mama, what are you?" "I'd like to say something," I continued, walking to the front of the room. "May I?" Ava had no choice but to hand me the microphone, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm as I positioned myself where she'd been standing. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Elise Monroe, and I want to thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate Monroe's Table." I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the room. This restaurant has been my life's work for the past 8 years. Every recipe, every tradition, every relationship with our community, I've poured my heart into making this place special. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see Ava in my peripheral vision, her face pale under the harsh lights. "My daughter has presented you with an impressive vision tonight. She's clearly learned a great deal in culinary school." I turned slightly toward Ava, whose eyes were wide with growing panic. "However, there's something you should know before making any investment decisions." The room went completely silent. "Monroe's Table has been sold." The words landed like a bomb. Investors exchanged glances, confused voices rose, and Ava stepped forward, shaking her head.
"What?"
"Mama, what are you talking about?" 3 days ago, I finalized the sale of Monroe's Table to Baptiste Hospitality Group. The transaction is complete, the papers are filed, and ownership has been transferred. Ava stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "That's impossible. You can't sell without your permission?" I met her eyes steadily. "Actually, as the sole owner of Monroe's Table, I can sell to whomever I choose." The room erupted in confused chatter. Investors pulled out phones, some already heading for the door. But I wasn't finished. "I'd like you all to meet the new owner." I gestured toward the entrance, where Lionel Baptiste had just walked in, impressive in his navy suit and commanding the room simply by existing. Lionel Baptiste, founder and CEO of Baptiste Hospitality Group. Lionel walked to the front with the easy confidence of someone who'd done this before. "Good evening, folks. I appreciate you all being here tonight, though I'm afraid the investment opportunity you came to hear about is no longer available." "This is insane," Ava said, her voice rising. "Mama, you can't just..." "The good news," Lionel continued, his voice warm but firm, "is that Monroe's Table will continue to operate under my company, preserving the authentic recipes and community atmosphere that made it special. Mrs. Monroe will remain as executive chef and partner, ensuring the restaurant maintains its heart and soul." He paused, looking directly at Ava. "Unfortunately, there will be no expansion under the previous management's vision. Monroe's Table will return to its original mission, serving real food to real people." Ava's face cycled through shock, rage, and something that looked almost like grief. "You sold it," she whispered. "You sold our restaurant." "I sold my restaurant," I corrected gently, "to someone who understands what it really is." The room had mostly emptied by now, investors filing out with apologetic nods and business cards tucked away and used. Ava stood in the middle of the dining room, surrounded by the elaborate staging she'd created for a future that would never exist. "I can't believe you did this," she said finally. "I can't believe you made it necessary," I replied. She stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed her purse and stalked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. This isn't over. But it was. The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with Lionel in the restaurant that was finally, truly safe. Well, Lionel said, surveying the white walls and harsh lighting. Looks like we've got some redecorating to do. I smiled, thinking of Monroe's photo in my purse, ready to return to its place of honor. Yes, I said. I think we do. 6 weeks later, Monroe's table looked like home again. The yellow walls had returned, warm as summer sunlight, and Monroe's photos hung in their rightful places, the opening day picture in the spot of honor behind the register. The harsh spotlights were gone, replaced with the soft lighting that made everyone look like family. The sterile white surfaces had given way to the gentle wear patterns of a place that was loved and lived in. But the biggest change wasn't in the decor. It was in the kitchen. No, baby, watch the roux. I called to Jasmine, a 19-year-old culinary student from the community college who reminded me of myself at that age, eager, terrified, and determined to prove she belonged. You feel it turn, don't you? That moment when it goes from flour and oil to something magical. She nodded, stirring with the concentration of someone conducting a symphony. Beside her, Marcus, a different Marcus than our domino-playing regular, practiced his knife skills on onions, his movements growing more confident each day. Lionel had kept his word in every way that mattered. Monroe's table was still Monroe's table, but now we had the resources to be what Monroe had always dreamed, a place where tradition lived and grew, where young cooks could learn not just techniques, but the heart behind them. Why don't some restaurants feel like this? Jasmine asked, still stirring her roux as it darkened to the perfect shade of chocolate. Because they forgot why they started cooking in the first place, I said, checking the seasoning on the day's jambalaya. Food isn't just fuel. It's love on a plate. When you cook for someone, you're taking care of them. That's what makes a restaurant feel like home. The lunch rush was starting, and I watched through the pass as familiar faces filled the dining room. Mrs. Henderson was back at her corner table. Tommy and Marcus had returned with their dominoes, and the Williams family had made Monroe's table their Sunday tradition again. But there were new faces too, young professionals who'd heard about us on social media, food lovers drawn by the story of our resurrection, families discovering what authentic hospitality felt like. Donna was back too. She'd called 3 days after the investor event, asking if her job was still available. I heard what happened, she'd said. I'm sorry I left. I should have trusted you. You did what you thought was best for your family, I'd told her. That's what you're supposed to do. But if you want to come home, there's always a place for you here. Carlos had been harder to win back. When I called, he'd been quiet for a long time before saying, I don't know, Miss Elise. I got hurt pretty bad by all that. I know, I'd said, and I'm sorry. But Monroe's table needs you. The real Monroe's table. He'd started part-time 2 weeks ago and was already calling customers honey again, asking about grandkids and remembering exactly how everyone liked their coffee. Ava was gone. She'd moved out of her apartment the week after the investor event, leaving no forwarding address. Her social media went dark. When I called, my calls went straight to voicemail. I'd driven by her old places, hoping to catch a glimpse of her, but she disappeared as completely as morning mist. I told myself it was better this way, that she needed time to figure out who she was when she wasn't trying to reinvent everything around her. But late at night, alone in my kitchen, I missed her with an ache that felt like losing Monroe all over again. Chef Elise. Jasmine's voice pulled me back to the present. I think it's ready. I tasted her roux, rich and complex and exactly right. Perfect. Now add your trinity, and let's build something beautiful. 3 hours later, I was climbing the stairs to my apartment, tired in the way that comes from good work well done. The restaurant was humming, the staff was happy, and Monroe's recipes were being passed to a new generation who understood their value. I almost missed the envelope slipped under my door. My name was written on the front in handwriting I recognized immediately, careful cursive learned in elementary school, refined over years of taking notes and making lists. Inside was a single recipe card, the kind Monroe and I used to write our recipes on back when the restaurant was just a dream. But this wasn't Monroe's handwriting. It was Ava's. Mama's gumbo was written at the top in her neat script. Below it, the ingredients were listed in the exact proportions I'd taught her when she was 12 and wanted to help in the kitchen. The instructions were precise, patient, the kind of directions you'd give someone you loved. At the bottom, in different ink, she'd added a note. Add more salt. Like Mama used to. I stared at those words until they blurred. She remembered. Through all the culinary school training and investor presentations and talk of elevated cuisine, she remembered standing beside me at the stove, watching me taste and adjust, learning that cooking was about more than following recipes. It was about caring enough to make something better. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a phone call, or a visit, or an explanation. But it was something. A recipe card that said she'd been paying attention, even when it seemed like she wasn't. A small acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, the things I'd taught her had value after all. I walked to my kitchen counter, where Monroe's opening day photo sat in its cleaned frame. Carefully, I placed Ava's recipe card beside it. 2 pieces of my heart, side by side. Outside, Monroe's table glowed in the evening light, alive with the sounds of people sharing meals and making memories. Tomorrow, I'd teach Jasmine how to make cornbread. Tomorrow, Carlos would tell his stories, and Mrs. Henderson would grade her papers, and the restaurant would continue being what it had always been meant to be, a place where love lived. And maybe, someday, there would be room at our table for one more. I touched the recipe card gently, the way I used to touch Ava's forehead when she was small and feverish. Not a reconciliation. Not yet. But it was a beginning.